another sewing tutorial. I'm Carolina and today we are making the Holibae boxers. You can get the pattern for the style on my website, studiocarolinashare.com. I'm gonna link it down below as well. If you wanna see the making of this pattern, you can check out the sewing vlog that's on my channel. I will link it somewhere here as well. And this is the garment that we are making today, or this is my piece. This is what I made. You choose your own fabric. If you sew this piece and post a picture on Instagram, please tag me at studiocarolinashare and use the hashtag #CSHolibaiBoxers so I can see all of your lovely creations. And without further ado, let's get started with the tutorial. So I'm not going to cover all the pieces that you need to cut because it's in the pattern file on page 6. So check that out. What is it called? It's called Fabric Consumption and Pattern Layout. And on page number 7, you have the calculation for the elastic band that you need in the back of the waistband. If you still have any questions or something's unclear, you can always send me a message and I am happy to help. All right, let's dive into the supplies that you need. You need fabric, light to medium weight fabric. Something with mild structure works really well, like a poplin is what I used. Elastic band that's 5 centimeters in width, lightweight interfacing, and sewing thread. So I'm gonna start with calculating the elastic that I need. I'm gonna do this by measuring the largest part of my lower body, so either my hips or my waist. Then I'm going to take this measurement and subtract the front waistband from this measurement. And the measurement that I have left is what my elastic needs to be when it is stretched out to its max length. And then I'm gonna hold my elastic flat on one end and then just stretch it as far as I can, like to its absolute max on the other end. Then I will mark that, just verify again that it is the length that I need it to be, and cut it. If your hip is wider than your waist, you have to make sure that you can comfortably pull the short over your hips, but then still fit snugly on your waist. If you need this explained a little bit more in detail, you can check page number 7 in the pattern file where you have the calculations and also how you can decide what to do based on your body shape. Moving right along, these are the pieces for the front of the short. You have 2 waistbands, 2 front legs, pocket sacks, and interfacing for the outer front waistband. For the back, you have 2 legs, you have 2 waistbands, and 1 elastic. And then you also have 2 of the banded hems, 1 for each leg, and this is how the leg pieces fit together with the banded hem. I'm gonna start with interfacing my waistband. So I'm gonna take the outer front waistband and interface the inside of that. So now I'm just gonna do some ironing prep on some of my pieces to facilitate my sewing later on. So I have my inside front waistband, I have my inside back waistband, and I have my 2 banded hems. So on my waistbands, I'll fold the bottom edge of my waistbands in 1 centimeter and just iron that flat, and I'll top stitch it down later. And on my banded hems, I'll do the same thing. But first I will fold my banded hems in half, iron that flat, and then I'll iron the inside edge down 1 centimeter to top stitch it later on. And I do that to not have a raw hem there. So if your preference is overlocking or zigzagging, that's totally fine. You can do that instead. I just prefer this finish. This is the edge that I'm talking about. It's the bottom edge of the inside waistband. And on the banded hem, it is this edge right here. So it's when it's folded and it's the inside edge here. I am first going to iron it in half to mark the middle of it, and then I will fold it open and iron in that edge. So this is what it should look like when it is all ironed. On the banded hem, you also have a notch for the side seam separating the front leg with the back leg. It doesn't really matter on my fabric, but it could potentially matter on your fabric. So if your fabric differs in any way and it's important what is front leg and back leg for you, then follow the notches and kind of make sure that you have 2 or 1 of each side of the banded hem. Otherwise, just, forget about the notches. So here I'm just showing that I have one front leg in this direction and one front leg in the other direction. Now I will move on to overlocking or zigzagging my edges. Doesn't matter which one you do. If you have an overlocker, great, then use it. If you don't, then just use a zigzag stitch. It doesn't matter. This is my front leg and I will overlock the rise, the inseam, the side seam. On the back leg, I will do the same thing, rise, inseam, side seam. On my pocket stacks, I will start with overlocking the side seams, so keeping piece 4 and 3 separate from each other. When I have overlocked the side seams, I will place piece 4 on top of piece 3 and overlock the curve. So overlocking the two pieces together. So here I have pinned my pocket stacks together, right sides facing each other, and you can see that they are not attached on the side seam. Now I will just overlock the two pieces together along that curved edge. And there you have it, that's the overlocked edges. Here you have the pocket stack with the side seam still not attached to each other. Next step is to sew the rise together. So I will take my two fronts, sew them together on the curve of the rise, and do the same thing with my back pieces. With 1 centimeter seam allowance, like there's gonna be everywhere else. So just doing the same thing with the back pieces. Sorry, there's a plane flying past. Try to ignore that if you can hear it. Then I will iron both of those seams open. Next up, I will take my front and attach piece number 4 to the slant of the pocket. So here my piece number 4 is white. So I'll just pin the right sides together and then sew that with a straight stitch at 1 centimeter seam allowance. You don't want to attach piece number 3 anywhere to this. This is only piece number 4 and 1. Then I will iron the seam open. Then iron it closed, folded over to the pocket side, and I'll do an understitch near that edge. And the understitch I do anywhere between 2 to 5 millimeters from the previous seam. This is what it looks like. Now I'll just iron that pocket fold flat. And this is what it looks like with piece number 3 peeking out there underneath. And you will notice that the front pocket opening extends a little bit past piece number 3. And that is to facilitate you putting your hands in and out of your pockets. Because if the opening is the same size as the pocket sack, there is no extra ease there and it's just gonna be a hassle and uncomfortable getting your hands in and out. So you gotta have a little space there. and we will just move that side seam to fit the pocket sack. This is the outside of the front, and then you got the inside of the front. You get your pocket sacks laying nice and flat there. And I will now sew a straight stitch along the curve of that pocket where we previously overlocked or zigzagged. So only on piece number 3 and 4, just a straight stitch, 1 centimeter seam allowance. This is what it looks like. Now I will gather the top waist of my front, but only pieces number 1, not the pocket sack. So I will fold out my pocket sacks and do 2 gathering stitches in the seam allowance of my waist of my 2 front leg pieces, so pieces number 1 and 1. I'm gonna go from where the slant of the pocket starts to where the slant of the pocket starts on the other piece. When you sew a gathering stitch, you want to turn your stitch length up to max. Do not do a back stitch. Leave a little piece of thread hanging out when you start and sew all the way to the end, and then leave a piece of thread hanging there as well. The first stitch should be 2 to 3 millimeters from the edge of your fabric. Second stitch should be 5 to 7 millimeters from the edge of your fabric, and the 2 stitches are parallel to each other. When you've done your gathering stitches, you will pull on the 2 under threads of your gathering stitches, distributing the fabric evenly as you pull. Next step is to attach the crotch between the back and the front short. So I'll just match up my rise seams, my center seams, with each other by passing a needle through that stitch. Like so, and then pinning the edges together. Then sew that with a straight stitch, 1 centimeter seam allowance, like everywhere else. Iron that seam open. Now I will move on to my waistband. So as you know, on my waistband pieces, I have my front waistband, outer piece is interfaced, and then on my inside front waistband, it is folded down on the bottom edge. And on the back waistband, I have my inside bottom edge folded down as well. So I will now start with sewing my top edges of my front waistband together, and then I will sew the top edges of my back waistband together, and I will also top stitch that folded edge down. So this is what it looks like. This is my top stitched folded edge, and here are my 2 waistbands. So I will iron my seams open first, then I will iron them close to the inside waistband and do an understitch on the inside waistband side. And that's what that looks like. So you have the top stitched edge at the bottom there, and then you have the understitched edge at the top of the inside waistband. Now I'll take the interface piece of my front waistband, find the center notch, and match that up with my center seam on my front short. On piece number 3, there's a notch at the top that will match up with the fold of the pocket slant. So just pin those 2 in place and then let the pocket fall naturally. pin the waistband in place. So I'll pin the sides together and then the center together and the pocket opening together with the waistband. I will also make sure to pin my seam on my two legs open when I pin it to the waistband. Then I'll distribute the gathering of the front short evenly along the rest of the waistband. Now when the waistband is pinned in place with the short and the gatherings are evenly distributed, I will fold in my pocket sacks and pin them in place as well, without gathering them or altering them in any way. I'll do the same thing on the back waist, so pinning my waistband to the back legs and finding the center notch on my waistband, matching it up with the center seam on the shorts, and then just pinning it along that edge. Now I'll attach the waistbands with a straight stitch and 1 centimeter seam allowance. I will iron these seams open and then fold it over into the waistband. I'll also just iron down my waistband fold. Don't have to do that now, but why not? I'm ironing, so I might as well do it. And this is what the front looks like. Do the same thing on the back. So iron the seam open and up into the waistband, and then just iron down the fold of the waistband. And that is what the back looks like. Now I'll sew my side seams together, and when I do this, I will finally close the side seams of my pocket sacks. And I'll do that by aligning them to the side seam of the front short. This is what I meant with that you're gonna have a little bit of ease in the pocket opening because it's larger. So you'll have to shift it back to fit the side seam of the pockets. And the waistbands you will sew together folded open. Match up the seams of where the waistband connects to the legs by putting in the needle and passing it through the top and the bottom seam at the same time to make sure that they are aligned. Do the same thing with the seam connecting the outer and the inner waistbands. And then just pin along the entire sideline of this short. This is what it should look like. Do the same thing on the other side. Then sew those seams together with a straight stitch, 1 centimeter seam allowance. And iron the seams open. And this is where we're at. The pockets are done, and we will now attach the elastic in the back waist. So I'll fold my shorts inside out, fold up my waistband, go to the side seam, and where the seam allowance of the side seam and where the short connects to the waistband, I'll take my elastic and place that edge underneath these 2 seam allowances. I'll just pin that in place, and this is what it should look like. I'll do the same thing on the other side, so the elastic stretches from one side seam to the other side seam along the full back. So I'll just secure that elastic a little bit further along underneath the seam allowance of the leg and the waist. And that is just so it doesn't move around, it lays straight. Now I'll do a vertical stitch in the seam allowance value of the side seams to secure the elastic to the waistband. This is what that stitch should look like. I've just gone back and front the entire stitch. And the elastic is now secured to the back waistband, but it's like laying a little loosey-goosey there. So I'll fold over the waistband and pin it to the side seam. So side seams of the waistband, fold it over to match up with the side seam on the legs. I'm also just locking my overlocking threads into my waistband so I don't have to worry about them. Yeah, I'm just securing them in my waistband. So I'm pinning down my waistband along the front, just laying it flat. The front is the easy part, the back is the tricky part. So doing the same thing on the other side seam, matching the seams up. Now I'll go to the back waistband, and essentially I'll be doing the same thing. I will just fold over the waistband, over the elastic, and pin it down. It's a little tricky to do this, but basically what you want to do is you want to just fold your waistband flat so you can pull the elastic to one side, fold it flat, and then shift your elastic around until you've pinned the entire edge of the waistband. And to check that you've pinned it well, you can just kind of stretch out the waistband when it's pinned and verify that there's no pulling in any direction. Now I'll do a stitch in the ditch to lock the waistband to the leg. And a stitch in a ditch is just sewing a seam in the previous seam line along that connection seam line so it's not a visible top stitch. And again, it's going to be a little difficult to do this on the back, but just shift your elastic around as you sew. You're going to have to pull, sew, and then shift the elastic to the back. But there's no way around this because your elastic is going to be shorter than the waistband. So you'll just have to like pull and shift as you sew. If it's a little tricky at first, I recommend doing a little test piece, like getting the technique in, because it's definitely something that you might need to get used to if you've never done it before. Now when the waistband is stitched down, folded over, and the elastic is enclosed into the waistband, this is what it looks like. Before we go any further, you try it on, okay? Try it on, make sure that you can pass it over your hips and that it's a nice fit around the waist. If it's too loose around the waist, just unstitch a little bit on one of the side seams and pull your elastic tighter and cut off the excess. Try it on again. You want to try it on now because if you try it on later when you've done the top stitching, it's going to be a nightmare unpicking that top stitching, okay? So try it on before we top stitch. When you're happy with the fit, we'll move on to the top stitching. And the reason we do top stitching is because the elastic is shorter than the waistband, making the fabric pucker up, like it's just poofy. And you can keep it like this if you want to, but to get a neater finish, a flat waistband look, you will want to top stitch it. So I recommend doing 3 to 4 top stitches horizontally along the back waistband. So I will place my first marking at 0.5 centimeters from the top and 0.5 to 1 centimeter from the bottom. Then I'll divide the distance between these two markings to match with either one other marking or 2 markings based on how many top stitches I'm doing. Check the pattern file, step 15 on page 14 if you're a little bit confused by this. Then I'll top stitch the back waistband to the elastic. And I do this by stretching out the elastic to its max when I top stitch. And try to keep the fabric from pleating or folding over itself when you're doing this top stitch. If it does, it's okay. It's not the end of the world because the elastic is going to naturally crease when it's relaxed. But you just want to avoid that it's bulking up in areas on the waistband. And a little tip to counteract that, if you're having like the fabric bulking up on one end of the waistband, is doing your top stitching from different sides, each top stitching row. So you start the first top stitching row from, say, from the left to the right, and then the next top stitching row, you do the right to the left. That way your fabric is going to shift around the waistband evenly. This is what it looks like when the top stitching is done. And we're almost done. We're now just going to attach the banded hem to the bottom. So the first thing I will do is match my banded hem to the right and the left leg based on where the notch is. And you remember I folded down the inside edge, and this will also help me differentiate which banded hem goes to which leg, which again doesn't really matter unless you are doing like a pattern play or a color play. So you can kind of like, depending on your fabric, you don't have to worry about this. But if you are doing something a little extra, you can use this as a guide. So the first step, I will pin my side seams together on my banded hems. Then I'll sew these side seams together with a straight stitch, 1 centimeter seam allowance. When I'm doing this, I'm also gonna just sew the top stitch along the fold of the inside hem. I will iron those seams open. Then I'll just iron that fold again. Now I'll attach the banded hem to the leg of my shorts. So the seams of the banded hem that I just sewed goes to the inseam, and the side seam of the short matches up with the notch on the banded hem. I'm pinning my side seams open and my inseams open. And then I'll pin around the full leg. Do the same thing on the other leg. Then I'll attach that with a straight stitch, 1 centimeter seam allowance. I will iron those seams open and then fold it in to the banded hem. Then I'll fold over the banded hem, covering that seam. And then I'll do a top stitch a couple of millimeters underneath the connection seam of the banded hem and the leg. And that is the final step. Congratulations on your new Holibae boxers. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And remember, if you make this short and post a picture on Instagram, please tag me at Studio Carolina Shearer and use the hashtag #CSHolibaeBoxers. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.